All right, let's jump right in. If you're studying international law, you absolutely have to know the SS Lotus case. It's a big one for exams. It all kicks off with a pretty straightforward accident, a collision at sea, but it spirals into this huge fundamental question. Where exactly does a country's power end and another country's begin?
So, let's set the scene. Picture this. Before midnight, you've got the SS Lotus French mail ship steaming along towards what we now call Istanbul. Out of the darkness, it smashes right into a Turkish coal ship, the SS Boz-Kourt, and the results, they were tragic. And next day, when they dock in Turkey, the Turkish authorities march on board and arrest the French officer who was on watch, a guy named Lieutenant Demons. Bam! Just like that, this isn't just a maritime accident anymore. It's an international crisis. So as you can imagine, that arrest kicks off a massive diplomatic firestorm between France and Turkey. And the whole thing really boils down to this one single question of jurisdiction.
Okay, so here's where the legal battle really begins. The two sides were worlds apart. France's argument was basically, hey, our ship, our rules. They called it flag state jurisdiction. The idea is that the SS Lotus was like a little floating piece of France, so only a French court could try a French officer. But Turkey came back with a totally different angle. They said, sure, the mistake happened on your ship, but the effect, the sinking ship, the dead sailors, that happened on our ship, which we consider Turkish territory. It's a classic legal showdown.
So who's right? France? Turkey? Neither country was willing to budge an inch. So they did what you do in these situations. They took it to the big leagues, the Permanent Court of International Justice. And really, everyone was watching. This was the million-dollar question. Who gets to prosecute?
And what the court came up with, well, it became legendary. This is where we get the famous Lotus Principle. And if you're taking notes for an exam, this is the part you really want to pay attention to. It's a huge deal in international law, and it's built on two key ideas.
Okay, part one. This part is pretty straightforward. The court said a state cannot use its legal power outside its own territory, unless there's some kind of international treaty or a long-standing custom that specifically allows it. So basically, your laws stop at your border. Simple enough, right?
But then, for part two, the court completely flips the script. It says that within its own territory, a state can do pretty much whatever it wants. It can exercise its jurisdiction, unless there's a rule of international law that says, no, you can't do that. And this right here is the absolute heart of the Lotus Principle. It boils down to this. For a country, whatever isn't explicitly forbidden is permitted.
So, with that powerful principle in hand, the court was ready to make its call. And boy, was it a big one, and a super controversial one at that. This quote from the judgment really says it all. Restrictions upon the independence of states cannot therefore be presumed. What does that mean? It means the default setting for any country is total freedom, total sovereignty. If you want to claim a country can't do something, the burden of proof is on you to show the rule that says so. It wasn't up to Turkey to prove they could prosecute. It was up to France to prove they couldn't.
So the verdict comes down, and it is razor thin. It was actually a tie, and the court's president had to cast the tie-breaking vote, siding with Turkey. The court basically said, okay, France, show us the rule that says Turkey can't do this. And France couldn't. They couldn't point to any treaty or custom that prohibited Turkey from acting. So the court concluded that since no rules said no, then the answer was yes. Turkey had not broken international law.
But believe it or not, the story doesn't stop there. This ruling sent massive shockwaves around the world and actually ended up changing the law of the sea forever. And here's a little fun fact for you, something to help you remember the case. This was a huge deal in Turkey. It was a massive symbol of national pride. So much so that the Turkish Minister of Justice, the guy who argued the case, Mahmud Asad Bey, he actually changed his last name to Boz-Kourt. After the sunken ship, that's how much this victory meant.
Okay, so a lot of countries were, let's just say, not thrilled with this ruling. They saw it as giving states way too much power, so the international community got to work. Over the next few decades, they created new treaties leading all the way up to the big one, the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, what we call UN Clause. And what did it do? It effectively overturned the specific outcome of the Lotus case for collisions. Today, the law is clear. Jurisdiction belongs to the flag state. So let's bring it all home. What's the big takeaway, especially for an exam? You have to get this distinction right. The specific ruling about who prosecutes after a ship collision, that's been overturned. It's history. But the underlying Lotus Principle, that idea that what is not forbidden is permitted, that is still alive and kicking. It's super influential in debates about all kinds of modern, borderless problems. Think about cybercrime. It's the same fundamental question, right? In our crazy, interconnected world, we're still wrestling with the legacy of the SS Lotus. Where exactly do you draw the line?